puts up a three. And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz time on the Believe Network, leading you into the weekend. Welcome in, everybody. This is Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. We love our sponsors at Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Once again, that's a BELIEVE, BLEAV. Bet Online. The game starts here. Get to a couple messages from our great sponsors in just a moment after we preview what's coming up on the show. Hoops home and away conference matchups are leading the docket today. We'll discuss takeaways from that. Neil Meyer and I will, along with the new chief of staff for Cincinnati basketball, longtime veteran coach Bill Komar, coming to the fold and beefing up Wes Miller's support staff behind him. And then we also have Cincinnati football. They take another hit. This is the recruiting class. What was shaping up to be so strong has seen two players decommit in the last week, and the latest commit a lot more damaging than the running back they lost in the last week or so. And we'll get to just what that recruiting class is looking like. Is it where it needs to be when we look at the national rankings and Cincinnati hovering near the 50s compared to all the other schools in the Football Bowl subdivision? All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz after these messages from our great sponsors. Bringing in Neil Meyer now, Russ Heltman with you all. And Neil, we have the matchups home and away for Cincinnati basketball. Some of the biggest takeaways I had from just looking at this slate. We don't have dates obviously yet, but Neil, this is exactly the kind of setup, exactly kind of opponent matrix you wanted to see if you're a Bearcats fan dreaming of big things this coming season. Your away-only matchups look like this: at Iowa State, at Colorado, at Oklahoma State, at Houston, at UCF. Your home-only matchups look like Kansas, Arizona, Arizona State, Texas Tech, and TCU. So that's three of arguably the top 5 to top 6 teams going into the 2024-25 season in the Big 12 that you get to face at home only in Kansas, Arizona, and Texas Tech. And then the home and away matchups are BYU, Baylor, Utah, Kansas State, and West Virginia. Neil, that trip to Iowa State is going to be difficult. That single trip to Houston, going to be difficult. But overall, I think UC got a decent slate of just less taxing away opponents. And this is a good mix for them to potentially get 22 to 25 total wins in the regular season when you mix in the conference slate along with the non-con.
Yeah, Russ, absolutely. And let's talk about this conference slate. I think it was very well expected that you were going to see Kansas at home after going to Allen Fieldhouse last season. And then you get the likes of Arizona and Caleb Love, who is arguably a top 10 team in the preseason rankings. So that you have the Kansas game, who is projected at preseason top 5 right now, depending on what medium you look at. And then you come into the factor of you get Arizona at Fifth Third Arena. There's 2 top 10 matchups potentially at Fifth Third Arena this season. And then you add into the factor of you go on the road. You have to play Iowa State and Baylor and Houston all on the road. Thankfully, you bring in Baylor to Fifth Third Arena for a home and home as well. So there's potentially 3 top 10, top 15 matchups that are slated to be played at Fifth Third Arena this season, and just in the non-conference slate alone. And then you're looking at it, Russ, you bring in Arizona State as well, who's going to shock a lot of people especially after landing top 15 talent Jaden Quaintance, who was committed to Kentucky flipped his commitment to Arizona State following the move of John Calipari to Arkansas. Texas Tech and TCU both also come to Fifth Third Arena. And Russ, for those who remember last year, the battle with TCU at Fifth Third Arena was a very good ball game. Very exciting. Came down to the wire, went to some overtime, got some physical contact. If I remember right, that was game Micah Peavy sustained that cut. So it got physical. That was a great matchup. But then you get the home and away. You bring in Utah. Let's talk about Utah a little bit too, Russ. It's going to be the return of the Matson brothers as they now linked up after Gabe went to Utah. Mason goes to Boston College for 2 years. Now they're back together at Utah, so they will get their return to Fifth Third Arena as they were part of the John Brandon recruiting class. Gabe only lasted a year in Cincinnati before going on to Utah, where he's been absolutely making every opportunity count out there for the Utes. Mason has been averaging about 9 points per game at BC, transfers to Utah. Now they'll have an opportunity to come back to Fifth Third Arena as well. But the away games, Russ, let's talk about it. UCF is going to be an interesting one. I feel like they've always played very, very close down there at UCF. Houston, everybody knows what Houston is like. And then Iowa State is returning key components from their tournament run last year. But Russ, if there's another thing that stands out to me here about this conference pairing is they only got one matchup versus the former ACC team or AAC teams, and that is UCF and Houston. So overall, compared to a season ago, last year they had the home and home with both of those teams. Now this year, with the 4 new members, you get all 4 of them, just about. So yeah, you get Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. So you're getting all 4 of the newer teams, and you lock down Utah for a home and home. So overall, I'm pretty excited for what this conference pairings, Russ, as you mentioned. And then you talk about what this team's record could potentially be. Russ, we're looking at maybe 4 top 10 opponents coming to Fifth Third Arena, and then you still have to factor in you have your neutral site game versus Dayton, downtown at Heritage Bank Arena. Then you still have Xavier coming into Fifth Third Arena for the Crosstown Shootout. So there's a good opportunity, Russ, that Cincinnati could be playing a top 25 team just about every night, but you're looking at 6 substantial quad 1 games right there alone, and 2 of them come in the early portion of the season with Dayton and Xavier.
Plenty of opportunities to prove to the committee that they should be a worthy team to get one of those at-large bids, if not winning the Big 12 tournament. I think they have the depth, they have the returning talent, second highest percentage of returning scoring of any Big 12 team this season, 75% of the scoring returning from last season on this UC roster. The coagulation, the gelling, all of that's already happened outside of the transfers that they brought in. So it's all there. It's all laid out right there. We'll see how the travel schedule ends up hitting them. That's going to be a big factor with all the miles that these teams are going to have to travel in the Big 12, which is, I'm pretty sure, the largest land footprint of any conference in the country. So that's the next thing to really assess right there. What are you going to say, Neil?
Consideration too, as you mentioned, the travel. There's no bye week this year in conference play. Can't forget about that.
Right. So the travel is even more important. It's just like if they get a few of these long West Coast road trips spaced out throughout the conference slate, that's bad. You want them all to be conjoined, mixed in at around the same time, get through that stretch, and then be able to kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel and get away from that long, hounding middle of the academic calendar travel stretch that is going to be an issue for these teams that they're going to have to overcome. And the seniority and the kind of chemistry and just the already in place talent that is already here and been here and gone through a Big 12 schedule is going to be a big factor in that as well. Looking at a name that has been added to the Cincinnati coaching staff. Looking at Bill Komar, touching on this real quick, Neil, veteran bench guy. He has kind of overseen a lot of different programs over his time, has lived in Cincinnati before. He was the director of operations for Xavier from 2001 to 2008. He comes over from Ball State, as he was a special assistant to the head coach at Ball State for the past 3 seasons, is now Cincinnati's chief of staff. Quote from Wes Miller here: Bill Comar is a tremendous addition to our program, tremendous amount of experience in college basketball, has filled a variety of roles throughout his career. I don't think there was anyone more prepared to be our chief of staff than Bill. I'm excited to welcome him and his family to Cincinnati. And so Comar probably going to have a similar role that he'd had at Ball State, where he oversaw non-coaching personnel and was kind of the conduit to the university and other outside entities for the program. So just getting into the big boy status, more and more of college basketball. This program, it might not bring in the amount of money that football brings in, Neil, but this is the preeminent program at the University of Cincinnati right now. This is the cream of the crop. This is what all of the other teams are kind of aspiring to do in terms of taking a program in shambles 2-3 years ago to a program that has not made the NCAA tournament yet, has not met expectations yet, but is widely expected and has earned high expectations heading into their head coach's 4th year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Russ, as you mentioned, Bill Comar is a big addition to the staff, because you're looking down at some of the coaches that he has worked with throughout his respected coaching career. Let's name a couple. He's got Archie Miller, who he's obviously has spent time at Indiana, now up on the East Coast there. He has Herb Sendak from Miami, Charles Coles from Miami, Oliver Purnell. He spent time with him while he was up at Dayton. And then he got to work with Thad Matta and Sean Miller while they were at Xavier. So, I mean, you're looking down the respected coaches that Bill Comar has worked with, Russ, and the experience states for himself. I mean, I think it said he's been to 18 postseason appearances, including 12 NCAA tournaments. So overall, I mean, he has plenty of experience to be here and helping on Wes Miller's staff. Obviously, this is a role that Jake Thielen once held, and now he's the head coach at Cov Cass. So overall,
I'm a little confused on that, because Thielen was the director of player personnel, and this is chief of staff. I think they're completely different.
Yeah, they're
positions.
Two different. Yep, I confused.
I think they're still going to be hiring a director.
Yeah, they'll still be hiring a player director. Yep.
This is not a bench spot for Wes Miller, so to speak.
No. Yep. So this is like I said, it's a good addition, Russ. It really is. And I mean, anytime you can add somebody with 20 plus years of high level coaching experience. I mean, you saw what he was doing with Tim Buckley. He does it here again with Bill Comar. I mean, past 3 seasons special assistant coach at Ball State. Anytime you can add a caliber and highly respected coach like that, you're in great hands.
Yeah, we still expect a replacement for Thielen as the final bench piece, final kind of added director of player development. We'll see if that ends up coming down the pipeline. We expect that in the next few weeks or so. This is a little bit of a surprise edition, but it makes sense as things are changing more and more in the sport of college basketball, just having that person that can keep the ducks in a row, keep everything on the up and up, and make sure everybody is doing the right thing on the non-basketball side of things is very, very important. Let's take a quick break and get to our important part of the show, thanking our sponsors and getting them shout outs on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. Coming back after this, we have Cincinnati football loses another commit. This time it's more damaging and significant compared to the running back they lost last week. Still a 3-star talent they lost, although this is a different 3-star than the first commit who decided to bow out from Cincinnati services. All that coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, Cincinnati football has added some names, lost some names over the past week. All in all, they have fallen from the 30s on 24/7 Sports, the high 30s in the overall team rankings nationwide, to number 49 on 24/7 Sports after 2 commits bow out. We talked about how they lost the running back last week, and now they have lost another talent, this time a hometown hero and 3-star linebacker Eric Gale. He is no longer part of the fold after Colin Wilson left for Mississippi State last week. Eric Gale committing to Illinois this week. 899th ranked player nationally, 69th ranked linebacker. He was committed to Cincinnati in the spring, coming out of Withrow, just down the street from UC's campus here in Cincinnati. Going with the Illinois Fighting Illini, a little bit of an interesting switch from Cincinnati to Illinois. And just all in all, that's a tough loss, Neil. He was the highest rated player by ESPN in Cincinnati's class heading into the week, and they lose him. They're down to 15 commits overall. You have, in terms of defensive players, linebackers, one linebacker in the class right now, and that's fellow hometown hero Paul Nelson. This is a big hit, Neil. This is a big hit. It's tough to see this loss for Cincinnati football. I downplayed last week's loss of Colin Wilson. That was not a big deal compared to this loss in Eric Gale, widely considered the number one defensive player in this class for Cincinnati, depending on the service you look at, and a hometown hero that no longer wanted to play for the Bearcats.
Yeah, Russ, and as you mentioned, this is a substantial loss in the 2025 recruiting class for many reasons. Obviously, so being a hometown kid. This was a guy who came to visit Cincinnati back in April, committed on the 17th of April, and then was kind of one of the guys who spearheaded the movement to start rallying in these commits in the 2025 class. But ultimately, Russ, you and I have heard it throughout the last few seasons that we have covered this program. These coaches want to target the best caliber players right here in the Cincinnati area. Eric Gale was a 3-star defensive end from Withrow High School, had a lot of offers, elected to commit to Cincinnati early in the process, but recently took a visit to Illinois over the weekend, where he then ends up committing to Illinois on Wednesday night. So overall, it's a substantial loss, Russ. If you ask me, a substantial loss because they had him at a 86 overall ranking according to 247 Sports Composite. He was right there in the middle of the pack of the 15th commits. But overall, Russ, this is probably one of the bigger damaging losses within this recruiting class, to say the least.
Yeah, now when you look around major services, they go from earlier in the week being 39th on 24/7 Sports to, as I mentioned, going to 49th. ESPN had them at 34th, but Neil, ESPN half of their write-up in their latest entry for UC, which was the first time in the 2025 cycle that they've been included in ESPN's top 40 classes, half of the write-up was about Eric Gale, and now he was the only 4-star that they had considered a talent of that caliber in UC's defensive fold. So they're going to be dropping out of that list once we get the latest update, unless Cincinnati adds a big name to replace Gale over the next couple weeks. Looking around the rest of the rivals, overall, they were 58th entering the week, and they've actually climbed up a little bit to number 49 nationally. And when you look at On3, sitting at, I think, 49 nationally as well. Overall, Neil, excuse me, 52nd nationally, behind the likes of Indiana, Illinois, Virginia, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Houston, Pitt, Minnesota, SMU, Syracuse, Duke, West Virginia, Mississippi State, Arizona State. Neil, these are schools that UC has to be able to out-recruit if they want to have any chance, any hope of building a foundation that can be a Big 12 caliber, championship caliber outfit. You have to out-recruit these middle-tier power conference schools if you want to have any chance at that, especially when you are a school located in Cincinnati, Ohio, a hotbed for recruiting talent. The 300-mile radius we just talked about, you just lost a player to a school outside the 300-mile radius in Champaign, Illinois. That's tough. That's tough to swallow for sure. And it's something that when you look at what the Bearcats basketball recruiting contacts, offers, visits look like compared to the Bearcats football offers, visits, contacts look like, there's a whole lot of 3-star, middle tier 3-star, low tier 3-star on the football side. And Neil, it's basically all high level 4-stars and 5-stars on the basketball side. Football has to catch up a little bit sometime soon. We're not looking at them necessarily to meet these kind of expectations in the second recruiting class of Scott Satterfield, but you certainly cannot be losing these key lifeblood type of players that are going to funnel and power your program for the entirety of this decade under Satterfield in a profile like Eric Gale. He's exactly the player they have to be able to seal the deal on once these conversations kind of hit the pavement. Once the rubber meets the road, you got to be able to get these types of things done, or else you're never going to end up amassing classes with 6, 7, 4-star legitimate type of talents and be able to compete for Big 12 titles. It's very clear. If you are not recruiting baseline middle tier 3-star talent, at least 2 4-star talent at the minimum, then you're not going to win a Big 12 title. You're not going to be going to college football playoffs. Those days are over. You have to be able to sign serious talent and then develop it up to major talent. The days of signing 2 stars and low 3 stars and developing them into conference champion level players in the AAC is over. There's too much money in this. There's too much money in this conference, and the recruiting classes. Bottom line, man, they can't be hovering in the high 40s, low 50s, and for fans to expect this program to compete for conference championships, which this is the history and the bar that Luke Fickell has set, that Brian Kelly has set, that this program has established in the 21st century, and hit the low bar of its 21st century establishment with the 3-9 record in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And as you mentioned, they got to find a way to keep those high 3 stars and get some 4 stars back in there. You have 2 in the cycle right now with Jamari Loach and Mikhail Skinner, but got to find a way to continue to maybe get 1 or 2 more, get about the 3 to 4 4 stars each year, along with those high 3 stars, to be able to really build that recruiting class. And I think Scott Satterfield and his staff are doing a great job at identifying the kind of players they wanted, Russ, because look at where they were a season ago. I think you and I have talked about this plenty of times, but when they took over this job, they basically had to rebuild a whole roster. They had about 33 transfers, if I remember right, incoming freshmen and transfers. This year, that number is not so high. I don't even think it's maybe half of that. But overall,
it is. They had 23 plus transfers this year. I mean, they were right up there with the highest level of transfers in the country. So
yeah, so you still have a decent amount of transfers, and then coming back in. But the biggest thing is, Russ, they're starting to really identify and build that culture that this staff is wanting to build. So overall, with them getting out on the recruiting trail, I think they'll be all right. You still have 15 hard commits in this class. With, like we said, Russ, you and I have talked about it multiple times, that they'll probably try and go for maybe that 20 to 21 high school ranking recruits. So still got a couple spots there. I do expect we see maybe 5 or 6 more potentially in the later few weeks. But overall, Russ, I'm still excited for what the staff and them are able to do. But as you mentioned, you got to find a way to keep these local talents here home in Cincinnati and find a way to continue to get these highly touted guys to visit the University of Cincinnati.
Exactly. If you want to compete for a Big 12 title, I mean, I don't make the rules. I'm just playing the game, and the rules are you have to be able to get solid tier talent, and you got to be out of the 50s. You got to be in the 40s at least, preferably in the mid 30s to high 20s if you want to be competing for Big 12 championships for the rest of the decade. They're getting there. They're slowly but surely getting there. We'll see if they can keep piecing together this class. I'm sure they will, as Neil mentioned. They're not done yet. We'll see what they keep adding the rest of the way. Still plenty of time this summer to nail down some great talent and cement that class for the back end in the middle 30s nationally, as opposed to where they stand now, which is in the back end of the 40s, near the middle of the pack in the FBS. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.